If you are in a relationship with somebody and you say, let's not talk right now, the person wouldn't come back to you and say, that's a violation of my free speech, motherfucker.
What the fuck is free speech as a social good? It's fucking complicated.
Well, hello and welcome to the Joe Rogan Experience. I'm sorry, considering this is Oscar Gaff week, welcome to Owls at Dawn. Did I read the card right? I get confused. There's so much production confusion on this small show that I get confused with the placards that I'm supposed to read. But we are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world. We decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I am not Warren Beatty. I am Austin Hayden Smith.
And I'm Troy Polidori, and dude, if you wanted to be Warren Beatty, you should have just passed it off to me to take the hit like he did to Faye Dunaway last night.
Poor Faye Dunaway. Oh. All right, brother, let's get into it, huh?
Yeah, so our first segment, as always, is the Shitty Minute. This is where one of us rants about whatever is grinding our gears this week. So, Austin, what's gear grinding you?
What is gear grinding me is what actually has gear grinded me for ages, but it just came to a head, I guess, this weekend, and it has to do with how people manufacture their own dramas in their lives. And I think it's just, life already has enough crazy shit, right? In the West, we're pretty privileged, especially if you're from a middle-class background or upper middle class or upper-class background. You've got white people problems, as we like to say. And that shit's real. I get it. Chemical imbalances are real, and trying to worry about keeping your job and pleasing your bosses, and that shit is real. I get it. Pressure is real. Anxiety is real. Tension is real. Family strife is real. But, motherfuckers, I just think that we don't know how to be happy. And instead, we are addicted to the drama. We are addicted to this shit. I think that because we have so much leisure time, I was just telling Troy before we started recording this, I've been really balls deep in global history of late, and I've been looking at these people that have been living in the 500s and thinking to myself, what the fuck did they do with their lives? How shitty were their lives where you didn't get to just play on toys and, communicate with people around the globe at the touch of a finger. And I think that all of this ease and all of these commodities and all of these toys have made us into infants who are obsessed with manufacturing their own drama so that they can get some kind of dopamine rush to just wake them from the boredom of advanced, happy capitalist life. Now, of course, there are people who, around the globe, are seriously dealing with shit, and that's not necessarily the best thing in the entire world. Definitely, let's try to alleviate some of those tensions so that people can try to seek happiness and flourishing and whatnot, but in the West, we need to stop fucking creating our own dramas and trying to emulate what we see on reality goddamn television. Now, I know that we have elected a president who was a reality TV star, but that does not mean that we should start continuing to do this throughout the rest of our lives and try to live the Real Housewives of Orange County in our daily lives. Fuck that shit, man. Gosh. Just stop being so damn dramatic. It's lame. That's what I've been annoyed with this week.
All right, so you have to clarify for me, dude. What exactly are you referring to, if anything specific that's dramatic? This doesn't sound like personal drama you're dealing with, but cultural drama?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I think that one of the skills, if you can call this a skill, that I have cultivated over the years is that I'm pretty good at just not engaging in drama. So I don't really abide long Facebook rants. I don't really surround my people that do long Facebook rants. Every once in a while, I'll get a person, and then I just kind of how did that person slip through the cracks where they're Facebook ranting about their girlfriend cheating on them in such a public forum? That's very interesting to me. But they're obviously doing it because they want some sort of attention and affection, and I get it. Drama comes from a place of real human need, I guess, maybe. But I just don't generally surround myself with people who are interested in creating these weird social dramas, that create these he's sleeping with that person and she said this about that other person and they're doing this and that. The gossipy sort of, OC, Laguna Hills, Mob Wives, fucking Top Chef or whatever the fuck, Gordon Ramsay's, where everyone's backstabbing Survivor, Big Brother shit. All of that shit, that shit has never appealed to me. It's never really existed in my life. I've never had any patience for it. And for some reason, maybe I've just been lucky. Maybe it's because of an unconscious way that I comport myself with other humans, but the people in my life don't tend to be like that. And so when I see it, I just immediately am kind of grossed out by it. And of course, I know we always bitch about social media and stuff like that, but it seems like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube comments and whatever the fuck else, they tend to all be rooted in this need to stir up drama. They make things bigger deals than they actually are. They're trying to stir up fights, and I don't know, man. It just all seems so manufactured. It's all fake. It is all fake. And I don't mean fake in the sense of like it's not real, but in the sense that it is just this fabricated need for drama. And I think it's because people are just bored as fuck because we have so much opulence that I think they need something to kind of wake them up from their stupor, of just being plugged into bored leisure all the time.
There's got to be some utility to the idea of like a cultural death drive.
Yeah.
Where like groups of people together try and just kill themselves.
Yeah.
In the Freudian sense, but just embiggened to larger groups. Have you noticed, dude? There seems to be like a weird confluence between our shitty minutes lately, where like you're starting out with like care of the self, Socratic stuff, Foucauldian stuff, and then I'm doing politics and the internet is stupid most of the time. And then we're like converging on the same thing together. Like personal psychological and social political internet is like becoming one horrible mass of destruction.
Yeah. This is like in the Bible where it says that the two will join and become one, Troy. That confluence is called a holy union in the ancient tongue.
It is one of the 7 sacraments, yeah.
That's right. No.
7 podcast sacraments.
Yeah,
What is extreme unction then?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Let's not go there.
Let's not go. We already marked this podcast explicit, so no, and it's weird too. I don't want to sound like I'm angry or despairing, so I'm in somewhat playing it up. So I guess now I'm being dramatic and manufacturing my own drama. But I really am annoyed by it. I really am discouraged by the need for people to create petty fights, if that makes sense. And I feel like, again, social media is a place where these things are fostered to an extreme degree. And I don't think it's psychologically healthy. So one of the things, though, that I've been, I guess, particularly attuned to is the way that I think social life is emulating our entertainment media. So I said it somewhat flippantly earlier, but I genuinely do think that because, when we watch TV shows like Big Brother, it isn't just simply a representation of real life at all, obviously. But I think what's happening is that they're creating a sort of medium of social interaction that people, when they sit there and watch it so often for so many hours a week, for so many years over their life, they begin to emulate that type of character and that type of behavior. And I think that the stimulation of drama and the sort of manufacturing of this sort of idle talk type of social relations becomes even greater magnified. And so it's almost as though, life is imitating art in this sense, and it's just tiring, dude. I'm so tired of it. It just feels fake. I don't know. And I look at people, I'm like, what? Why? You're not happy? You can't be happy manufacturing that fucking drama, man. Like, you're not happy. Just stop for a second. You don't need to start fights with everybody and get up in people's business. And I don't know. It's just weird, dude. It's just weird.
This is the part where you get into your enlightened hedonist rant, right? Where it's like, this is not hedonism, even though, the conservative argument, this is all caused by people seeking their own pleasure over the hierarchies and traditions of the past. When actually the most hedonistic thing is to not do this bullshit because no one's happy doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. No, this is genuinely hedonist. This is Epicurean hedonism, right? Which is the idea of the sort of eradication of displeasure. And anytime you find something that is causing habitual displeasure, cut that shit. If people in your life are causing that kind of drama, cut them. Not with a knife, cut them out. But seriously, I don't know. We need to cut off the limbs that are causing displeasure, and I don't know. I actually don't think it's that difficult to do either. I do think I've been very fortunate. In my life, I just don't have people. Like Troy, you are not drama. The people that we surrounded ourselves with, for the most part, that we were friends with at university, they're not drama. Now, I do have a couple of buddies that were in my inner circle that tended towards the drama, but then my other buddies, when we would sit there, we would just kind of laugh and we'd be like, oh, God. Or when people would try to bring in drama to us, it's kind of like, we don't need to handle it in that way. We can, if somebody does something to wrong somebody, it doesn't need to be like, oh, my God, this is what just happened. Can you believe it? These people did that. And those people, it's like, hey, how about we just work through it together and say, yo, I fucked up. You fucked up. We fucked up. Let's get through this together. We talk through it. You need to smack me in the face. That's fine. Metaphorically, literally, whatever. Let's just move on from there and keep going and try to create better social relations. I don't know. Fuck this drama shit.
Yeah, you could do a whole hedonistic Jesus thing, dude. Or Epicurean Jesus. Before you take the speck of displeasure out of your brother's eye, make sure you take the log out of your own, and then there will be no drama in the kingdom of God.
Yeah, I dig it, man. I dig it. But do you know what I mean? There's a person that I follow on Twitter, and I'm not going to out her, but she is very over the top. And I even said to her the other day, I was joking around with her, but I was like, I fear for your blood pressure levels sometimes because it's always something super intense and dramatic. And she's partly doing it for comedic effect. I do get that. And to what extent is she doing it to comedic effect, or to what extent does she actually interiorize and kind of harbor those sorts of anxieties? I can't say because I've never met her in person. But I will say that when I look at that sort of thing, and it's not just her, fucking Matty Iglesias, if you follow him, that fool is dramatic as fuck. That Paul Joseph, whatever the fuck his name is, alt-right guy, that guy's dramatic as fuck. Most of the people that I have encountered on Twitter have those moments where I'm like, whoa, like y'all cannot be happy. Really? This sucks that is your default tone and language that you, I guess, express and that embodies you. And, I just look at it and I don't know, man. I don't know. There's not it is going to sound so lame, but there's a real lack of sweetness. And it feels like there's a real lack of authenticity as well. Not that sweetness equals authenticity, but there's a lack of sweetness. There's a lack of authenticity, it seems like. There's a lack of patience. And it's so weird because I feel like I'm echoing some of that shit from Timothy that you read in the New Testament, about things that would characterize a preacher. But I think a lot of those characteristics come from the sort of history of reflective, rational, philosophical thought that sort of characterize at least individuals that are trying to seek a sort of stable harmony within themselves, where they're not too taken and swept by these swings of ups and downs in the emotions, right? And I don't know, maybe we just need to be a little bit more nonchalant, touch the world lightly, rather than be so goddamn concerned with our little tiny dramas.
And this has been Confessions with Austin Hayden Smith. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again in 2 weeks.
All right, let's move on to the main segment then this week, Troy. I feel like when you said that this has been Confessions with Austin, I felt like Frasier from the TV show Frasier. Remember how Dr. Frasier had his little radio hour? So this week we are going to be talking about something that's inspired by recent events, but hopefully we're going to delve beneath the surface a little bit and chat about free speech. I think, Troy, when you were taking down notes when we were chatting, what we were going to talk about this week. I think you wrote down, didn't you say, what the fuck is free speech?
Yeah, what the fuck is free speech?
I think that's what we're going to talk about this week.
Yeah, so I guess some basic context would probably be helpful, right? So the most immediate recent context is this whole, I don't know what you call it, a kerfuffle? That sounds like an appropriately feminine sounding analogy for the Milo Yiannopoulos situation. So I guess Milo Yiannopoulos, if you don't know who he is, probably you're living under a rock at this point, right? But he's he used to work for Breitbart News, and he's kind of he calls himself a professional or virtuous troll. That's his own words. Mm-hmm. Yes. And by that, I think he means the sense in which he's trolling. He is trying to get reactions out of people. He admits to that, but with, he thinks, a goal or end in mind to that. So he's sort of strategically being a troll. And you may have known him from several occasions, and I think it was the one African American actress from Ghostbusters, the new Ghostbusters. I don't remember her name. Yeah,
Leslie Jones.
He was a big part of that, right? Was that what got him banned from Twitter originally?
Yeah, exactly. After he said something along the lines, I don't remember exactly what it was, but he said something along the lines of, I didn't know that they allowed a man to be in an all-girls cast or something like that. He basically was reviewing the movie and he called her man. So, and then his followers all came out. He's got, a few 100,000 Twitter followers, and they started throwing racial epithets at her, and so it just turned into a big shitstorm. So Twitter banned him. Yeah,
and I guess I know he explained on his interview with Bill Maher the other day that he felt the virtuous part of that was that he was calling out basically inauthenticity. That her claim to having cried and been distraught and felt brutalized by the whole thing was ridiculous, and that no adult human being with like a functioning brain would actually feel that way, and that she was just trying to get attention by acting victimized or something like that. That led to a series of basically liberal attacks on him, going back into his past, kind of unearthing some quotes he had made about, I believe, a Catholic. He claims to be Catholic, and a Catholic priest that when he was a minor, he had a relationship with, and that sort of he felt it was a mentor and it was a positive experience in his life. And that came out with a couple of comments about how he thinks in some sense that was okay and a good thing, and we shouldn't stigmatize such relationships. And that then, he was sort of removed from the earth by the GOP and Breitbart.
Yeah.
He resigned from Breitbart, but you can probably read between the lines and say that he was fired. And so now
he was supposed to be one of the headliners at CPAC this past week, and his invitation was rescinded after sort of edited clips of audio interviews that he had given on various podcasts came out, and so they rescinded his invitation, and so that's kind of what led to him resigning from Breitbart and his press conference and shit like that.
Yeah, and the big part of it where the free speech thing comes in is he was supposed to speak at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, a couple of weeks ago, and there were a large number of protests, which in some cases I believe turned somewhat violent in certain smaller respects. And then the talk was canceled, and he was removed from the listing and wasn't able to speak there. And so he went on Bill Maher's show on HBO and basically said that liberals have lost their mind and that they don't defend free speech anymore, even though it's a classical liberal virtue. And I thought that was a really good sort of foundation of a discussion here, because free speech is such a ubiquitous term, usually used as a sort of weapon. Like, as in, you don't allow free speech when someone tells you you're wrong, or a talk gets canceled, or someone gets fired, or another Twitter brouhaha occurs. So I thought it'd be pretty interesting to talk about. I think the first distinction we have to make, which is kind of the obvious one, hopefully it's the obvious one, is a difference between free speech as a civil liberty and free speech as a social good. Like, clearly, free speech is enfranchised in the Bill of Rights, and you have the ability, as long as it's not going to directly harm somebody, to believe and say whatever you want. And that goes right back to John Stuart Mill on liberty, the liberty of conscience. You can believe and say whatever you want. That's a civil liberty you have. The government can't stop you from doing that. I'm pretty sure. Is it safe to say literally nobody says that's a bad thing?
Yeah, I don't think anybody says that freedom of speech in that sense is bad.
Yeah, so literally nobody, conservative, liberal, alt-right, communist, nobody is saying that's a bad thing. Nobody, literally nobody. And so when people use that
except for certain dictators, right, that silence dissent.
Well, yeah, of course. But I mean,
right.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about that here.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, people praise Putin, but they don't praise that part of Putin, I don't think.
Right. Right.
So when people say, "Oh, they're sort of taking away my right to free speech," no. If someone thinks you're a dick, or someone thinks that you're an asshole, and they tell you not to come over to their house anymore, that's not them taking away or abrogating your right to free speech. That means they think you're an asshole and don't want to be your friend anymore. So
Right.
having a talk canceled at UC Berkeley is not abrogating free speech. It's a civil liberty in that sense. Now, I
Right.
don't think Milo was necessarily making that specific point, but lots of people do make that point, and it's stupid and wrong. So don't make it. The real question, I think, and tell me if you think this is the right way to kind of set it up, is free speech as a social good, meaning not the kind where you have free speech from the government, meaning it can't take away that right to free speech. Is free speech as a social good, meaning we should, sort of, or it's good for society to allow anybody and everybody, no matter if their views are considered reprehensible by the masses or not, to speak without being necessarily removed from public discourse or banned from certain areas that are not necessarily public, but Twitter it's private, but it's kind of public, right?
Yeah.
And areas like that. And the way that I think Milo's probably, if you're going to have a good faith discussion with him, which I'm not sure you can, but if you were to, this would be the question. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, there's a difference between, and this needs to be understood, there's a difference between the First Amendment's protection of free speech than the idea of free speech as some sort of social good that exists on a flattened hierarchical plane or a flattened ontological plane. The former is something that we should absolutely defend because what it has to do with is the protection of people power over and against institutional power. And that's a good thing. But if you are in a relationship with somebody, friendship, spouse, something like that, and that person is saying something, and you say, hey, let's not talk right now, let's talk later. Or if it gets heated and you say, shut up, the person wouldn't come back to you and say, that's a violation of my free speech, motherfucker. No, they would never say that because they understand that this is a different sort of ethical plane at which the communicative exchange is taking place. Now, I will say this. I do remember being on the playground when I was a little kid, remember? And someone would come up to you and they'd be like, just shut up. And you'd be like, you can't make me. It's a free country. You remember that shit? Yeah, that shit was really rampant when I was a little kid. I remember that shit. I probably used it once or twice, but I definitely remember for a fact other people used it. And I remember thinking to them, I was like, yeah, it's a free country. But then I do actually remember even thinking to myself, it's a free country, but is that what they mean in the First Amendment? I remember like wrestling with that as like a little kid. Not in a deep way, but I remember them saying it and like intuitively I was like, yeah, but it just seems a little different. And I think it is different. I think that when you are engaging in a non-governmental or non-hierarchical, well, let's not even say hierarchical, but when you're engaging in a non-governmental medium of social exchange, that the idea of free speech or the idea that free speech needs to be protected as an absolute is not something, first of all, that is protected by any sort of law. And second of all, I'll be completely honest, I'm not even sure that it has any value or meaning in an absolute sense.
By absolutely mean non-functional sense?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, exactly. Because I'm a pragmatist when it comes down to it. So pragmatically, there is value to listening to other people. When I think of free speech, I don't want to conflate free speech as the supposed natural right law that is embedded in the First Amendment of the Constitution or that classical liberalism sought to develop as a foundation for democratic societies. I don't want to equate that with individuals having healthy communication. And I think there's a difference. And I think healthy communication does not necessitate free speech in the way that silencing someone like Milo Yiannopoulos would necessarily negate.
Yeah, you see this a lot on like Reddit threads, and I mean, I don't frequent a lot of like message boards and stuff like that, but I get the sense that you see this a lot with moderators. Moderators can sort of make discussion much more rational and directed and reciprocated in terms of value for everybody involved if they delete a lot of shit posting and trolly comments.
Right.
Which then those trolls and shit posters claim that that's against free speech or the ethic of free speech, when really it's we're trying to free speech in that social good sense is thought of to be, I think, by the moderating logic, as it's a functional good. Free speech is good as long as it functions for something better than itself. It's not the end goal of discourse, just to execute your free speech. Yeah, I like that you brought up the classical liberalism angle because it goes back to that idea, again, straight from Mill, that all of our beliefs about what's valuable and good are irrational beliefs on our customs that we grew up with or whatever it is. And so our expression of those irrational beliefs is essentially all free speech is. Since it can't be rational, you might as well just have the freedom to express whatever you want. This is kind of the worst possible end goal of that, since now with the internet, everybody can speak all the time about anything.
Right. There's something interesting maybe, and I know we've talked a little bit about freedom, but it's not often discussed, I don't think, in the context when people are talking about free speech, about what they mean by freedom in free speech. They talk a lot about what free speech means as a sort of singular unit, but they don't really break it down and say what do they mean by freedom within the context of speech. And then there's not much discussion with the other term about what speech is. A lot of times people will say, well, it's freedom of expression, and we can talk about this later, but okay, so then is protesting an act of free expression that is coming up against another act of free expression, which is a person that's able to speak? And so when you get that, what you get is a war of power relations, right? And so in that sense, it isn't that one act is negating free speech. It's that one act is maybe just more free, quote unquote, than the other. But then that begs an investigation into what is freedom. Because does freedom mean that it's untethered? Does it mean that it's free from ideological control? Well, you and I don't think that anything is free from ideological control. So then is there ever such a thing as free speech? Or is it basically protecting the right to spout ideological bullshit? In which case, why do we want to protect that? So these are all things that don't ever get discussed that I think actually are crucial for understanding what the fuck is going on when we're talking about how to create social relations that are trying to work in an agonistic sense within a democratic society.
And even, just from a classical liberal sense, the same problem like that with the harm principle arrives here in the form of speech. If freedom of speech means to say whatever you want, wherever you want, whenever you want, then that tends to come up against and counter my freedom not to hear you whenever you want or whenever I want, especially if it's, loud and obnoxious and trolly. And so those two things go up against each other and they contradict. You can't have both at the same time. So I liked your analogy with the playground a lot. I hadn't thought about it that, but I think we can really use this. So I remember being on the playground, and when, an asshole kid is bugging you or is mimicking you or is messing around with you to try to annoy you, and you tell them to stop, and they go, you can't tell me to stop. It's a free country. That feels really unfair to you, and you're frustrated, and you clench your fists in the Arthur style, and so you're upset about something's unfair and not right about that response. And clearly, they say that with a smirk because they know it's not meant to be in good faith. Even as a kid, they realize this, and so I feel like that's a really good analogy for what we're talking about with the Berkeley protests, because. Look, the reason it's unfair is because there is not a flat, equal distribution of power in that plane of existence. When you're on a playground, you're not allowed to be anywhere else. You're only allowed to be on that playground, which is a small inscribed area that you can't really get away from somebody if they want to mess with you. And so the reason it's unfair when someone says it's a free country is that you're literally in school and you would be arrested if you weren't. I mean, not literally necessarily, but it's truancy. It's illegal. So it's not a free country when I have to be in a prison yard with you, the asshole, and I can't choose not to be. It's the very definition of not free. Right. So that feels unfair because clearly it's not free. You're not allowed to not be annoyed. And so they're basically given power over you if you're not allowed to sort of be removed from their presence or get away from them. So it's not an equal distribution of power. They have more power simply because they're willing to execute dickishness when you're not. And so you look at the Berkeley protest, that same or similar and analogous unequal distribution of power exists. Who decides that Milo gets to speak at Berkeley? Not the students, not the community, not the majority of the people. It's not democratic. A couple of old white guys decided it was the case. And so, and Milo and his representatives. And so in that sense, when students come out and protest and say, we don't want this person to, who represents everything that is antithetical to our values, to speak on our campus, which is a very famous campus and is a symbol for kind of liberalism and academics and critical thought and all these kinds of things. We don't want him to put a stain on that and probably, and given past evidence, quite possibly use that as a weapon to hurt people, especially people, trans people and others on campus. And their protests...
And apparently he, there was an article that was written in Breitbart the day before that he had been planning on outing certain immigrants in Berkeley by name, calling them out by name, people who had either worked there or students. And so there was, I guess, some fear that he was actually going to be naming names of immigrant people and then sort of calling upon the federal government to pull back funding because Berkeley is supposedly a sanctuary university.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how true that is, and I don't want to sort of accuse him of things we're not sure he was going to do. He has done stuff like that in the past, so it's warranted to fear that. But even without that, I think the point still stands that this is like the bully getting on the playground and being like, it's a free country, I can say whatever I want, and then you saying, look, this is not fair because there's an unequal distribution of power. Clearly, the old white men who decided you could speak here have more power than the rest of us who actually do most of the work that produces what Berkeley is. Right? The students and faculty and grad students and everybody else. And community as well, who provides for it, as well as everybody in California who pays taxes for it and elsewhere. So in that sense, a protest is just a way of saying, look, I'm pointing out the unequal distribution of power and saying, we need to fix this. And so I have no other way to speak my mind. Speaking doesn't do anything. So in that sense, protesting is my form of speech.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm actually, I'll be completely honest, I'm all for protecting free speech within the, against monarchies or against governmental suppression. But in regards to the, let's say the ethical society, I don't really give a fuck about the protection of free speech, to be honest. I think that is a power play that is used by certain individuals to wield their strength over others. And what it ultimately ends up being is a struggle of strength. And so when you have somebody that says protesters must just sit and remain silent and allow somebody else with whom they have disagreements with to come onto their space and, speak words that they find as being antagonistic, I don't think that telling them to stay silent is emblematic of some virtuous upholding of a natural law or some sort of ethical law of free speech. I think that it's really just a power play, and it's saying, know your place, and you have to allow this to happen because that's what, and then they use it in an insidious sense. They say, no, if you want a democratic society, this isn't a tyranny. This is America where we allow free speech. No, that's not what it is. Free speech is where you don't have the government that is imposing itself upon you, and that you allow yourself as a democratic constituency to be able to retain the power against centralized federal forces or religious forces. That's what free speech means in the sort of classical liberal sense. It doesn't mean that you don't have the right to stand up against an invader that's coming to your place. Even if it's just a felt perspective, you have the right to stand up and push back and fight against it. And if the other person isn't strong enough to be able to figure out how they can wield their speech in a way that would allow them to be heard, then that's their fault. That's their fault. If Milo really was strong enough in his freedom, his potency, then he would have found another way to speak. And you know what? He actually did. And that's what's interesting. is he did because he took to social media back at his room and he played the victim, which was actually very clever, kind of gross, but very clever, because then he actually did use a platform in which he was able to exert free speech while saying, I wasn't able to exert free speech. But that is the expression of free speech because he had a platform, because we have a civic social arrangement that allows people to actually express their freedom because the government will not silence people. And that's the point, is it's this flat, lateral battle of power relations. And we need not to bemoan it when one group, one particular node within this network exerts its power in a greater degree of the other, because the other person can find a way to be able to sort of agonistically express itself. And that's, I think, what democracy is. And that's kind of what Chantal Mouffe talks about with democracy as being agonistic. It is. It's this constant agon, this constant struggle. And that, I think, is good. That's not free speech, though. That's something else. That's power.
Yeah, be wary when the people who bemoan their lack of free speech in a certain context are the same people who have huge platforms to speak.
Right.
Which is always the case. Anyone who bemoans the fact that they aren't getting free speech, you're only hearing that because they have a huge platform for speech, where most of the rest of us, regular people, don't have any platform for speech. Our speech actually affects basically nothing. It doesn't have any potency in the world, whereas theirs has huge potency, comparatively. So yeah, now I think we're pretty much in agreement there about power. As an analysis of speech, power is more important to analyze and to evaluate than sort of freedom, which is somewhat of an incoherent concept in of itself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That said,
it's this weird abstraction that, doesn't really have much teeth to it. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That said what?
Yeah, that said, I'll play a little devil's advocate maybe. Do you think if all else being equal, meaning if all relations of power and hierarchies flattened, being equal, do you think there's some utility to free speech in a scenario where you do have that flattened hierarchy?
Yes, because I think what you have then is you have a completely different structural system, one that doesn't exist. So it's great as a thought exercise, but it doesn't really exist. But let's say, relatively speaking, let's say me in my partnership, right? When she and I sit down to have a dialogue about what we want to do for dinner, is it a perfect equal relation of powers? Of course not. Who knows? There are all kinds of swirling differences.
Someone's making more money than the other.
Yeah, exactly. But, or someone's more tired than somebody in that moment, or somebody's feeling sick and the other person's not feeling sick, or somebody already ate lunch and they're not really that hungry, so they don't want to exert their power. There's never an equal playing field. But let's say, relatively speaking, you're in a mutual, respectful relationship with this person. You want the other person's flourishing. They want your flourishing. In that instance, the idea of free speech is a practical, functional expression or way of understanding how humans empathically connect to create something or to achieve a common goal. And in that sense, that's different. That's not what we're talking about, though. But yeah, in that sense, I'm down with that.
Yeah, I think my kind of favorite example is the classroom. There is a hierarchy there, especially from the academic institution itself and the way that it kind of impinges on the classroom. And the students amongst themselves. Obviously, some come from one class or another, economic class, and then, of course, the instructor. But there's an attempt, I think, in a classroom discussion especially, that you want to have some greater degree of free speech there than you would maybe have otherwise. And in a sense of, say, a student says something in class that would normally be a thing that if a friend of yours said it, you would tell them, look, you're an idiot, or, shut the fuck up, or something. That you'll take it and you'll say, you know what, let's look at that opinion and let's talk about, the logic behind it and what the reasons are for it and what the consequences are of accepting it and all these, things you would have in an academic discussion about something. And you can do that because there's an environment where you can safely do that without necessarily actually engaging in those consequences or making them occur if they are negative. So, there's one thing. If a student says, euthanize all black people, that's different. They're like rally crying or, trying to hurt somebody in the classroom's feelings on purpose just to be an asshole. That's obviously different. You don't allow that kind of shit. But if they're having a good faith discussion, and the question itself is in good faith, and they want to actually countenance it, then I don't find any problem at all, given that context, to allow a greater degree of free speech and to desire it and to consider it a good, a virtue of that environment in a way you might not in other contexts.
So then what do you think is the difference between that scenario and the UC Berkeley scenario? What are the underpinning conditions so that we can understand the logic of one situation versus the logic of another? I mean, I was talking about respect and empathy and a desire to achieve a common goal that would mutually lead to mutual flourishing. What are those things? They're kind of swirling around some sort of center. There's a nexus there that seems interesting. So what do you think it is that characterizes the one type of environment versus the other type of environment?
I mean, do you think it's as simple as just it's in good faith and the environment is built around accepting that when you walk into the classroom? And that doesn't mean that every single person is going to be in 100% good faith at every moment. But
Right.
that there's at least a guiding principle that colors the entire context, where if Milo Yiannopoulos honestly wanted to engage in good faith discussion about how social justice warriors are damaging to classical liberal virtues, I want to have that discussion because I kind of agree.
Fuck yeah. Me too.
I do
Fuck
agree
yeah.
with a lot of that stuff. But not for a second do I really believe he wants to have that discussion. He doesn't.
Right.
He's not a virtuous troll, at least in action. I can't say what he is psychologically. I'm not going to try and put him on the couch or anything. But from his actions, I think
His
can
character.
pretty easily
His
tell.
character Milo. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a character he plays in order to become famous.
Make a lot of money.
Yeah, make a shitload of money and get a book contract, which, of course, unfortunately he lost. I'm sure he'll be fine, though.
Yeah.
That makes me think that, look, this is not going to be a helpful discussion for anybody. And that, I do think there are those who I would vehemently disagree with, especially on the right, that I think you could have this discussion with. And there are those on the left I think you couldn't have this discussion with because they're not going to have it in good faith.
I just had a friend post a video the other day of this guy named Zach Pitt, Kansas. Do you know who he is? He's a fucking DNC committee spokesperson or something like that. Anyway, he was on the Fox show with Tucker Carlson, and they were talking about the transgender bathroom issue. And Tucker Carlson was asking him questions. Now, I'm not saying that Tucker Carlson from Fox News was in any way necessarily in an absolute good faith, right? Not necessarily. But I will say that this one guy that was supposed to be upholding sort of liberal virtues and liberal values was just such a dick. And his entire demeanor was attack, defend, not admit any mistakes of the Obama administration, no matter what, play the team game, hunker down in my silo, and shoot those fiery darts against the other team because I'm in a hostile territory. And I get it. If I were on Fox News, my guards would be up a little bit as well. But the point is that there was a real lack of authenticity. And I think that maybe this harkens back to my shitty minute earlier, is that when we aren't being authentic, when we aren't acting from within the conditions of good faith and the desire to truly connect, then it negatively influences any sort of social expression. And that includes, obviously, verbal communication.
Yeah, I don't really personally begrudge politicians and pundits and that whole political class and elite class from doing that stuff. I mean, I think I would never ever want to meet them, or be friends with them. But I don't begrudge.
I begrudge them, just so we know.
I mean,
I begrudge
just
them.
in the sense that, I feel like when you're watching that show, you walked into a boardroom meeting. When you walk into a boardroom meeting, you know who has the power, and that whatever discussion is happening and whatever's going on is going to be entirely false and non-authentic. No one's going to say what they actually think because of that relations of power between people that exist there. And so, you know what? Politicians and pundits are hired and or are representatives because they're supposed to fight for a team. And best case scenario, they're effective at doing that for the side that you want to win. That good faith discussion shouldn't really happen between politicians. And if it does, you're basically lucky at best. That's the kind of stuff that I personally think really has to happen in other contexts, from kind of basic social contexts like friend relations to, ideally, obviously I'm biased, but I think there's some self-selection here. education should be about that. A space where hopefully anybody, and move more toward that everybody part of it, can have the sort of attainability of getting an education, especially in higher education, where you can discuss a lot of difficult and complex and abstract ideas and problems and try and figure out for yourself what you think the best form of society is and the best way to live is. And that in those contexts, you can read a lot of stuff and talk about a lot of stuff that you might think in one case is reprehensible, in other cases not. And the same for everybody else. And there's a sense in which, hey, having your voice heard and all that kind of stuff is actually really helpful. You want to have all those viewpoints on the table so you can discuss them and compare them and contrast them. And so that's, I think, where that discussion really can happen. And it's much easier to have that good faith discussion when your income isn't dependent upon you taking a particular viewpoint.
Right. And I agree with you that the social landscape is set up in such a way that those are the contexts in which those types of interactions can occur. But I think the reason that I do begrudge political pundits and that I do begrudge the boardroom social relations that we see on, the various segments of cable news networks, the reason I do is because it conditions the way that social popular political discourse takes place, because we see this and then we mimic it. And that's my problem. And that actually goes straight back to my shitty minute, is that when there's so much conditioning taking place within a sort of narrow network of social relations, that this is how you talk to people, this is how you communicate, this is how you politic, then it influences us and it seeps into our unconscious, and I think it forms the habitus of how it is that we engage in social interaction. I think if Pierre Bourdieu was analyzing this sort of shit, that's what he would say, that there is this strange habitus of entertainment media and news media outlets that are affecting our social relations. And I think people then, when you listen to them talk, they are conditioned by talking points and yellow journalism and clickbait shit, and that unfortunately they aren't capable. They're not just unwilling, but I think they're not capable to break that reproduction of seriality. And that's what it is. And that's why I do begrudge it, because it just deepens and hardens those habits. And so that really does affect me, and it bothers me, because I think people are becoming hardened perpetually. And it's not just Trump, it's not just Obama, it's not just Bush and Clinton era. This is something that happens as we impute ourselves into our institutional frameworks, is that we solidify them and we harden them, and they become bigger and more powerful, and then they suck more from us. And when they condition the next moment of social relations, we're given a very small parameter within which we're able to actually function. And so our mediatory social relations are influenced by these negative influences. And that frightens me. And that bothers me. It really does affect me, man, because it's all inauthentic and it's all bad faith.
Yeah, it's like a malignant social tumor. And it's like grown
that's exactly
and gotten
what it
bigger
is.
and bigger, and now we're not really sure what to do with it. When the way to solve it would have been to never have kind of taken care of it and excised it in the first place before it got this big and dangerous. It kind of just kind of like a frequency loop kind of feedback on itself and everything. When I say I don't begrudge them, all I mean is just that, it's not necessarily their individual faults. And if you replace them with new people, the same thing would happen. It's definitely it's a social organization that's occurred. I mean, how many people?
Yeah, they're nodes in a network.
Yeah, how many people like post on Reddit or on Twitter and like, here's the thing we talked about in class today that I thought was really interesting, or here's the thing my book club is discussing. What do you think about it? No, it's always, here's the segment from CNN, here's the segment from MSNBC, here's the shit post from here or there. At best, it's like a relatively long form essay. But even that's, you don't know the person, you don't have the context there to have a real good faith discussion that can kind of reciprocate knowledge and learning on both sides.
So what do you think it is? Do you think that we're that cynicism has dug its talons within us so deep that we're almost incapable of authentic positive creation, or that we can't think beauty apart from these sort of cynical, ironic constructs that we have appropriated and that we live? I mean, what do you think it is? Why is it that we keep reproducing these sort of conditions of negativity, or what I would say are conditions of social alienation in the Sartrean sense from his later stuff?
I mean, we should just not be able to give opinions on the internet, right? That's the solution.
Yeah.
Just anything that's in the form of an opinion on the internet is automatically deleted.
So much for free speech, huh?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is functionally for the greater
No,
good.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, no, of course. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think, I know we've been kind of going on long here, but real quick, this is a really interesting discussion. What do you think about Milo then going on to Bill Maher and like fucking Bill Maher just getting lambasted by all these people for giving a platform to him, right? What do you think about that? Did he give a platform to something that he shouldn't have? Or, I mean, I know you hate Bill Maher in general, but what are your thoughts?
Here's the thing, dude. I mean, if you're going to try and entice Bill Maher or reprimand him and encourage him to not give a platform to somebody who is heinous, guess what? Bill Maher is fucking heinous. So, I mean, they're two peas in a pod, which is perfect for them to be together. If only an asteroid had visited them too. I mean, it's perfect to have both of them in the same room because they are the same person.
Yeah.
I mean, they just feed their own audience the shit that they want to hear, and they're smug, and they're douchebags, and they're totally bad faith at all times. All they do is shoot fish in a barrel. Milo does with the social justice warriors. He shoots the fish in a barrel, who the rest of us think are super annoying too. Same way Bill Maher does to mostly religious conservatives. And so, in that case, there's no actual attempts to make the world better or to help engage in learning, to being willing to admit when you don't know something, for instance, is a good sign. That's the case. And yeah, it's perfect to have them both together because they are reflective images of one another. So I don't care that I'm not going to lambaste them for having Milo on because that's exactly what I would ever expect. And of course, I watched the interview for some reason, and basically the entire time was Bill Maher agreeing with him about everything, except being like, "Aren't you kind of not nice to the weird trans people sometimes?"
Right.
And to immigrants. And basically he's like, I do fine. But like, oh, okay, I guess so.
Right.
Which is exactly what you'd expect. So,
well, and again, part of the reason that they're both okay is because ultimately they're serving the interests of capital. And they are taking place, their entire persona is a construction of the sort of juridico-political power structure of the regime of hegemony of capitalism, as Foucault would say, right? So anything they say or do, even if it seems to be transgressive or antagonistic, it's not. It's all safe and all within the sort of legal power structures that capitalist democracies have deemed acceptable because it's marketable. And insofar as it's marketable and you can make a profit out of it, it's okay.
They're both characters.
So,
they're both playing characters, very much so.
100%. I was going to say real quick, have you ever heard of or have you ever read Michel, I don't know how to say his last name, Houellebecq, Houellebecq?
I've heard that name, but no.
Okay, so he is a French author. He wrote a book called Submission in 2015, I believe. And I haven't read the book, but I recently read about the book in, was it Mark Lilla's? I'm reading two books simultaneously about reactionary mind. I can't remember if it was Mark Lilla or Corey Robin. Anyway, both really good books. Check them out. Mark Lilla's book called The Shipwreck Mind and Corey Robin's book, The Reactionary Mind. They're both about sort of political reactionary and political conservatism and stuff like that. Anyway, so the book Submission is a sort of dystopian future about the 2022, I believe, presidential election in France, in which like Marine Le Pen ends up getting, which is really funny, getting the majority. But apparently, it's something about where like her party didn't get enough to actually go straight into power. So the people on the left have to form a coalition with the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood is only like 6 or 8% or something like that of the population, but they're more aligned than any of the people on the right, and because they don't want Marine Le Pen and the sort of far right to take power, the Socialist Party and the Muslim Brotherhood come together and they form a coalition. And the Muslim Brotherhood somehow is given prominence, and the only thing that they ask for in the coalition is that they want control over the education system. And the reason is because they don't care about anything else. They know that if you can go into the education system, then that's where you can really start to have an impact and an influence on people. And it isn't some story about like the fear of the rise of Islam. As a matter of fact, it's actually a really, from the way that this person was talking about it, it's supposed to be a really sort of interesting discussion of religious and cultural integration. And you get this one guy, I think he was a professor, and at first he's like really reticent to be a part of the Muslim Brotherhood, and then he sort of kind of starts to get interested in it, and it's called Submission because it's about this idea how he ultimately submits to the sort of the call, if you will, of Islam. But the thing that was really interesting is you were talking earlier about where can that sort of influence take place, and it's in the educational system. And it made me think of this book because that's one of the things that Michel, God, how do you even say this? Houellebecq, forgive me, French people out there, it's so bad, but it's Houellebecq. And one of the things that he seems to be indicating is he's aware that the strategy for how you can actually sort of create any sort of meaningful social change is at the education system. And that's what the Muslim Brotherhood were doing in this particular novel. And it sounds really interesting. I'm gonna try to read it. Even though my French isn't all that great, I'm gonna try to read it in the French and you know, kind of trod my way through it here in the next year. But it made me think about it when you were talking about how the education system is that site where you can actually have that creative freedom of development through ideas and struggling with things, and how they kind of were like, yes, that's the site. That's where it is.
I mean, is there any like coincidence that that's exactly what's happening in America, where the GOP had to economic libertarian conservatives had to align themselves with the Christian right, and so then basically give them now an education system and be like, we're going to allow you to have private schools and they're going to be heavily subsidized indirectly, and then now we're going to maybe have a voucher system where you can use public money to go to private schools, and they're probably going to be have less oversight than they've ever had before. And Betsy DeVos, who's the queen of private schools and the kind of a radical Christian movement, is now the education secretary with 0 minutes of experience in education. Like that exact thing basically has already happened or starting to happen here, just because it's evangelical Christianity and not the Muslim Brotherhood. It's like whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but apparently the novel's really good, so people check it out. I'm interested to check it out. So yeah. So anything you want to say in summing up? What the fuck is free speech, Troy?
What the fuck is free speech? Well, it's free speech is definitely fucking having your own freedom of conscience from the government. Sure. Everybody agrees with that. No one thinks that's a bad thing.
We're cool with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
What the fuck is free speech as a social good? It's fucking complicated. But it's probably got something to do with having good faith discussion, wanting to sort of grow oneself and help others grow, because that's the social good itself that matters most in some sense. And free speech, whatever it is probably a function of that, a means to that. And if you start considering it as being the actual goal or end, a virtue in and of itself, divorced from context, then you might get into trouble.
Yeah.
Or you might end up being a internet celebrity who's kind of a dick.
Either way, it'll be a fun ride. Awesome. Sweet. Well, moving on to the next segment here. We're going to go into the Sticky Leaves segment, which is a segment where one of us talks about something that is giving us meaning in a world that is oftentimes devoid of meaning. And this week, it is Troy's turn to give his Sticky Leaves. So, Troy, what's up?
All right, my Sticky Leaves is going to be real short. Basically, last weekend, I went to the Broad here in Los Angeles, which is a museum of sorts. I actually don't know what's actually there. I think art. But I've been calling it the Broad. What are they calling it?
The Broad.
I've been calling it the Broad, and it's actually the Broad. I think
The Broad.
because it's not the broad like the adjective, a broad thing, a wide thing, but it's actually named after some family called the Broads or the Broad. Their last name is
Okay.
Broad, something like that. I don't know. I was corrected by a friend of mine, and
Yes.
I don't know that I accept calling it the Broad because that sounds ridiculous. But Clipping, which is a hip hop group, industrial noise hip hop group, played there last Saturday, and it was legit. And I wanted anybody out there who doesn't know who Clipping is, which is probably about everybody, because they're not exactly popular or listenable. If you're into sort of art house stuff, industrial stuff, noise stuff, just want to be challenged at all, either get some Clipping records or go see them live if you can. Their influence is actually growing a bit, their notoriety, because their lead singer of their MC, David Diggs, was in Hamilton. I believe he was Jefferson.
Oh
in
yeah,
Hamilton.
yeah.
Now he's big shit. He's really
I didn't
gregarious
know.
and
Okay.
well spoken, and he's definitely he's definitely. Hopefully, this is not racist, but he seems like the black guy who only has white friends.
Okay.
Is that, I don't know, is that racist?
Probably.
Maybe. He has that demeanor to him, and his entire band is white other than him, so that kind of justifies.
Is he
it.
related to Tay Diggs?
I do not believe so, but I guess it's
Oh, okay.
possible. So he got notoriety from that, and he made a funny remark that there's a lot more older white people coming to Clipping shows and having countenances that are horrified when they hear the music, which I always think is very funny. But their music is out there, and it's super noisy. It's not listenable. It's really good and challenging and pretty catchy, actually. Lots of pop song structures amidst the noise. Their last album I want to recommend, it's called Splendor and Misery. And it's a short 36-minute album. It's a concept album about slavery in space in the future. So it's sci-fi, and it recalls back to slavery, institutionalized, shadow American slavery. And the whole story, if you follow the lyrics in the album, it's really interesting, and it's a well-developed narrative, and it's pretty rare for a concept album to be actually like empathetic, but it really is. And I would say you sit down with that album. I'm sure it's probably on YouTube, the whole album, I would guess, and read the lyrics on Genius, and just kind of follow along the story. It was when I actually sat down and listened to it and read the lyrics while I was listening to it. It was really effective, and it's not really the most listenable album. It kind of the noise behind it, the beats, if you will, are always going to be part and parcel of the narrative. The narrative is the central role, and the music plays to that. So there's lots of sparse, kind of spacey, void type backgrounds to the whole thing, and it's kind of scary, and the kind of thing that you'd see as a score to Ridley Scott's Alien or something. But I'd recommend that to anybody, and to see them live, because they were fantastic. They were really, really good.
What's the album called again?
It's called Splendor and Misery.
Splendor and Misery. All right.
Clipping.
Clipping dot or clipping period. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it can be. They also do it without any of the I's, the vowels, because none of David Diggs' lyrics are from the first person, so they remove all the I.
Oh.
Because most hip hop is always from the first person perspective, and he ain't about that.
That sounds really fucking interesting. And so the show was good then, huh?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
I don't know. From a guy who didn't grow up on hip hop, I grew up on rock and metal. Live shows are such a huge part of that, and the
Right.
ability to reproduce and to show technical proficiency and stuff is very important to the live show. And in hip hop, certainly there's a technical proficiency to being an MC and to rhyming and all that, and your flow matters a lot. And so seeing that live can be really awesome. But the musical part of it is oftentimes just reproduced digitally in the speakers. Like, you just play the album,
Right.
basically. And so that leaves a lot to be desired as far as a live performance is concerned. Not always, but sometimes. You go see The Roots, you see a live band, it's different.
Right.
But with Clipping, it's definitely different, because they're reproducing a lot of these beats live, and it has a different flavor to it, because it's so noisy and depends upon acoustics and atmosphere, and and everything else to be effective.
Yeah, I'll have to check them out. Was the concert in that Infinity Hall of Mirrors or whatever the fuck that thing is called? Isn't that the famous thing at the Broad?
I didn't even know there was that. There was not there. There's some separate room for live performances they have now.
That's so cool, man. Yeah, because the last I was there, the Broad had just opened. Because it's relatively new, right? Like maybe 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's not
2 years
it's
ago,
not
3 years
super
ago? Yeah, and I remember when it was just being opened, and then, I was there for, maybe about a year or so before I came back over here. But there's this exhibition there that's the Infinity Mirror, or the Room of the Infinity Mirrors, or some shit like that, where the mirrors kind of bounce your reflection so that it looks like you go on forever, or some shit like that.
Is that where they
don't
filmed that scene in John Wick 2 where Keanu Reeves fucking kills everybody?
I don't know. That would be
You haven't
awesome,
seen
though.
John Wick 2 yet?
No, is it awesome?
Okay, I won't spoil anything, but he kills a lot of people.
Okay.
That's not spoiling anything, though, because John Wick.
No, that doesn't spoil anything. All right. Awesome, man. Well, I'll have to check it out. I have a feeling that this week there's going to be a lot of hip-hop music for me to have to sift through. So...
All right, so our last segment before we throw it to Mike for This Week in Hip Hop is bullshitting. And we're going to bullshit about something a little different this week. It's going to have less to do with whatever's trending out there in the world and more with our own individual experiences. I had a very interesting experience this last week with a job training exercise, the college that I work for, teach at. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about job training, and our own experiences there. Because I just kind of wanted to tell my story and see if you had anything similar.
Yeah, I'm curious. Let's see what you got.
So I should go first?
Yeah.
Okay. So I went to this diversity workshop, which I didn't have any idea what it was. I guess I could have done some research, but I was never going to do that. It's a diversity workshop at the college, one of the colleges that I work at, and I didn't know what it was going in. The first couple hours were just kind of the usual stuff you'd expect, talking about the fate of minority students in American colleges, and we had some speakers come in and talk about their own experiences and just everything you would expect from a diversity workshop and seminar. Then shit went down and got real. Because after that, they took us outside, they lined us up in groups, and they blindfolded us. We had no idea what was going on. They blindfolded us. And then they told us a chant. Now, each one of our groups had a separate chant we had to repeat as a mantra over and over again. Ours was "Let the circle be unbroken," which apparently is an ancient African, not ancient necessarily, but an African tribal mantra of some sorts. And so we had to chant this at the top of our lungs, and if we don't, they yell at us.
Okay.
And so we did this for about 20 minutes to the point where I was exhausted. And then they walked us around to the point where we weren't really sure where we were, but we're inside some building of some sort. And then music starts playing, and it's African tribal music. And there's incense burning, and you can feel fire, but not like dangerous, but like heat coming from somewhere.
Right.
And they're walking us around, and we're chanting, and we're doing the whole thing, and we have our hands on the shoulder of the person in front of us, so we're all in like a conga line of sorts. And it's all kind of nice and unique and strange. And then everything went crazy. Because then people start grabbing you and tearing you off of your group and yelling racial epithets at you. I was called the N-word more times than I've ever obviously been called in my life, in a non-joking way. And then they separated us, and they smacked chains on the grounds and chained people's wrists together and feet together.
Oh, shit.
I got my wrists chained for not very long. They took it off very quickly, but other people said it lasted for a lot longer than that. And they not threw you to the ground, but forcibly put you to the ground and then forcibly picked you up. When I was being led by one of these people, I ran into somebody else. I had a blindfold on so I couldn't see, and kneed them somewhere around the stomach area and almost fell over, and was really kind of worried that I'd hurt somebody. I have no idea if I did. And basically recreated the beginnings of the transatlantic slave trade on us, on faculty.
So they had you start off by standing in solidarity and having a community of people for 20 minutes. You built up those empathic connections, and then they ripped you from that and exposed you, separated you, isolated you, created tensions and conflicts, harassed you verbally, physically. Interesting.
Then they measured people. Like they would grab your arm and basically take their own hand and run it down from your shoulder to the tip of your finger. A way they were measuring you for sale, basically.
Mm.
And then really strangely, they fast forwarded once they did the whole getting on the slave ship and being taken across, taken out, sold, the whole thing. They fast forwarded to the late 20th century and played gangster rap over the speakers, which I don't know what that was supposed to mean necessarily. But it was really strange. No one knew what was going on, what was going to happen. And basically everybody was weeping when it was over.
Wow.
Not everybody, but there was a lot of weeping.
Yeah.
They had a debrief where they went around the room and asked people what they thought. And basically everybody that was willing to talk, said, "Thank you so much for doing this. I learned so much. It was an incredible experience. Thank you." And, I don't want to disparage those people's experiences or say that it was negative. I don't know what it was, positive or negative. I just literally have no idea what it was for. There was no talk about the reason for this experience was this. Just we recreated the transatlantic slave trade, and you sort of experienced it through some of your senses, just not your eyes. And hopefully you got something out of that, I guess.
Performance art. It's participatory performance art.
I guess if that was the point, I guess I get it for sure. And it was very effective, certainly. I don't know if performance art is the point of a diversity seminar. I kind of feel like talking about what it's like to be black at a California college would be a better kind of discussion to have, or at least something to actually kind of direct your workshop towards that goal.
Right.
But it wasn't. So
do you feel like it would have been for you more instructive or more effective if there was a half-hour discussion afterwards where you did then get to talk about what it therefore means to be an African-American student in a Southern California college?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know if it would have been more effective. It was very radical and different and unique. And so maybe I can't say I'm an authority on this kind of stuff to know if it would have been effective or not. But all I know now is that it was very traumatic for a lot of people, and I'm not exactly sure why. But it was an interesting story that I'll never forget. So that's something.
Yeah, so here's the thing. And again, I kind of am okay with shit like that. But what I wonder is someone who might have a more fragile psychological state, is that something that they could get in trouble for?
Yeah, I was thinking that a lot during the process. Like, are they literally doing this? They can do this without giving people's consent because they didn't tell anybody about what was going to happen. And just even if people are more fragile or, if it would trigger anybody, I mean, I don't want to get too much on that high horse, but that can also just not do anything. Like, it can be so traumatic to some people that effectively it just inoculates them from any ability to think about the importance of the experience, which I kind of feel like is exactly what happened. But I can't say well enough whether or not that's true. I just wonder.
Well, I mean, it's clearly empathy training to some extent, right? I've been in environments. I worked at a summer camp for a couple summers back east, and one of the things that we would do is, do you remember what's that woman's name that used to do those racial sensitivity seminars where she was really famous in like the 70s and 80s, or she started in like the fucking 60s or something like that, where she would teach her classroom students and she would divide them up into groups based on their eye color. And it was like blue eye colored kids versus brown eyed colors, and everyone with blue eyes and green eyes or something like that were deemed like the lesser class, and the brown eyed kids were deemed the superior class. Do you remember that woman?
No, I don't.
Oh, she's a really well-known educator. I can't remember what her name was, but she taught these sensitivity training, racial sensitivity classes, and that's what she would do. Is she would break up students. She started it in her elementary classroom, and then the technique became so well known around the world that she started leading seminars with adults and all kinds of stuff. And basically that's what she would do. She would divide people up based on their eye color. And the brown-eyed people were the superior ones, and the blue-eyed and green-eyed ones got treated like shit in these seminars. And then by the end of the seminar, people start to get offended that they're being treated like lesser people just because of their eye color. And she's trying to, develop empathic connections for individuals who would experience oppression, for those individuals with blue eyes and green eyes who likely have never experienced that type of societal bias before or prejudice before. So I've seen that shit, and I was involved in some of that training at these summer camps where it was a little bit different. But what they did is they created a circle where one group was in a circle, and they were told not to let anybody in their circle that was wearing a particular type of clothing, white shoes, black shoes, shorts, blonde hair, parted hair, short hair, whatever. And then the other group was they were told something positive, and they were like, okay, so that group's over there, and they're going to let you in, but you got to go in, you got to ask politely if you can be let in, And then people would say, hey, someone would come over and say the restriction was anyone with wearing shorts is not allowed in the circle. And so I come over and I'm wearing shorts, and I say, hey, how's it going? Can I come in the circle? And they say, no, get away. And I say, oh, okay, well, maybe there's just maybe I got to go talk to somebody else. And you have to use all these different tactics to try to get in. And eventually they keep restricting you from getting into the circle, but you don't know what it is about you, because they won't tell you what it is about you. They just don't want you in the in crowd. But then other people come over and they're like, hi, can I be let in? And they're like, yeah, sure. And they get let in. And you're like, what the fuck? Why won't you let me in? And then you go over to the same spot and you say the same thing. And you're like, what? Okay, so what did I do? And then you're trying to talk to the people that are in the inner circle, but they're now not allowed to talk to you because you're on the outside of the circle. And it's the same sort of thing. It's, empathy training, sensitivity training, diversity training, things like that. So that's the only thing I've been a part of, but it was far less traumatic than fucking chains being slapped onto your wrists and mocking the transatlantic slave trade. Very different.
Yeah, I feel like empathy is a resource, right? And so you can build it up and you can deplete it through different methods. And this is a huge buildup of the resource. It's supposed to be, right? Which then if you do that, there's like a toxicity level, as there is with anything else. There's a point where it's just like overwhelming and now you can no longer function. And if you don't try really hard to kind of pour that out and to let it drip until it's no longer toxic, it can basically do nothing and be inoculated. And so I think that may have happened, at least for me. Maybe it happened. Maybe I can't speak of everybody that experienced it, but yeah, these other ones you're talking about seem much more directed towards not overwhelming you, but getting you to think critically about it and then apply it to your current scenario, which is, I think, has much more utility.
Yeah, that's really interesting, man. So what were the other? I mean, I'm assuming it was all teachers, right, that were engaged in this,
and staff,
and admin staff. Okay, so what were people's responses besides crying?
Yeah, so a lot of people were crying and all that, and basically that was after that happened. They just fed us dinner and we left. So, which was really awkward. Like eat dinner and like watch a live band play after experiencing that. But I was sitting next to one of my colleagues who's like a 60-year-old guy from China, who's a philosophy instructor, and the whole time he had the face of what the fuck is going on. It was very funny. Obviously, being Chinese, I probably seen one or two black people in his life before he came to America, and I'm sure he obviously knows the history and the racial history and Jim Crow and all that stuff. But I'm sure for him it was even more shocking than it could have been for me, who's grown up hearing about all this stuff in school and in public discourse and all that.
No, I mean, I know it's hard to make an astute observation about yourself right now, especially so close to something. But do you feel like it was useful for you? I mean, you're a pretty empathic person anyway, but do you think that this somehow stimulated a sensitivity to diverse cultures that maybe you didn't have prior to this exercise?
Yeah, I don't know. I think if we had done a little more analysis of what you were talking about, the fact that we were brought together as a group and we were building this empathy for one another, and then it was stripped away, and what that means specifically for black students who come to the classroom and things like that. If we had made some tie-ins to that, I could have thought more critically about it and done a little more analysis and maybe used that empathy buildup for something good. Maybe I'm doing that right now, and so it is showing some utility. I don't know. I feel like there was some sense in which there was something important missing to the afterwards, to the debrief.
Yeah, without having too many articulated thoughts about it, one of the things where I might find it useful is the fact that it will affect people at an affective and unconscious level. And in that sense, I think I get what they're doing, because it kind of reminds me a little bit of the theater of the oppressed, which is this idea that there's a breakdown between the spectator and the actor, and that you guys participate together in invisible theater or various different types of performance art exercises that are all about the breakdown of hierarchy, the stimulation of empathy, and the sort of creation of social ties. And so it seems like this is very much inspired by that type of tradition, because when you go and you participate in a theater of the oppressed project, there's no dissemination of concepts afterwards, right? You kind of just are a part of the performance and then it's over. And it can take place within varying degrees. Sometimes it's invisible theater, right, where a performance takes place in a social setting where people get into a fight and it's meant to highlight a particular type of social relation or tensions within a social relation. You know, a man and a woman get into an argument and it's supposed to highlight issues of domestic abuse or something that is supposed to highlight racial inequalities, something like that. So, and then it just kind of stops, you know, and they don't say, all right, you were just witness to invisible theater. They just fucking leave. And then everyone there is like, Jesus Christ. But it's meant to affect at the unconscious level, not effect, but affect at the unconscious level. And I think in some ways this kind of fits within that tradition. And so in that sense, I think that there is a lot of utility in it, you know, because maybe it will sort of just be one of those attachments within a sort of habitual, tendential stimulation of empathy training that the school continually exposes you to over the years, you know? And so maybe this one instant isn't the thing that's going to all of a sudden make you this empathic superhero, but maybe it kind of just nudges you a little bit. And then maybe the next training one will do that, and the next, and the next, and the next. And then they hope that, you know, other things in your life will connect to these individual nodes, and then that will create stronger networks of empathy. So I don't know. In that sense, I kind of do find it useful.
I can see that. I'd like to see some actual studies done on if intense traumatic experiences like this that are meant to produce this empathy buildup actually results in people being more empathic. Like give them primers and stuff and figure and compare whether or not they're more empathic with a certain story that they hear or about someone who is African American or whatever it might be. That could be interesting. Yeah, I was thinking, for instance, as it was all happening, man, this is probably exactly what Oscar Grant went through. On the guy who was killed in the Bay Area several years ago. What was that movie that was based on Fruitvale Station?
Fruitvale Station,
which is fantastic. And that was a similar situation. He's with the train with his friends. They're united. They're having a good time. And then some shit goes down. And a man in power who he doesn't know, like a person storming the west coast of Africa, comes and wrecks his shit, yells racial epithets at him, attacks him, and then shoots him when he shows any sense of, like rebellion against that. So, yeah, that did make me think, hey, this is almost exactly what it must be like to have like a no-knock raid in your house or something like that. That's yeah, I can see that.
Maybe. Interesting. Yeah, that's intense. I've never experienced anything quite like that. Usually on the job training, like that's diversity training. I know my dad has gone through some of it. He previously worked for Kaiser Permanente, and they have this what's it called? It's this program that's called Thrive or something like that, where they give out these bracelets and they say Thrive on them, but it's diversity training and tolerance training and acceptance training, but I don't think it's anything this crazy. Like maybe the most intense thing they do is the game of Trust, where you have to like fall back into someone's arms. That's like the most traumatic thing that usually the corporate structures allow when they're doing job training.
I legit thought we were going to do that when they blindfolded us. Oh, here come the trust falls. Oh, shit.
Oh, that sounds interesting though, man. I don't know. Part of me kind of digs it, and part of me can understand why other people wouldn't dig it. And it's hard because someone like myself, I'm open to that sort of thing, and I don't mind disruption. But I know other people, they aren't as comfortable with that sort of psychological break. So I don't know. I want to be careful with creating any sort of final declaration of it's good or it's bad. Everyone should emulate that type of corporate exercise, but it does seem interesting, that's for sure.
Okay, Austin, you got your openness to experience dial up to 10 or 11. Next time you're in LA, I'm going to kidnap you and recreate the transatlantic slave trade all up on your ass.
Hey, man, I got kidnapped when I made it in the senior choir when I was a junior in high school, and they kidnapped me in the middle of the night, and they threw me into a van, and then they took me to a sleepover. Okay? That was pretty terrifying.
And then they guess you loved it.
Yeah, because it was just me, and, when you're in choir in high school, it's just you, a couple gay dudes, and a bunch of girls, so...
Someone loves me enough to kidnap me.
Yeah, for some reason that's not the same thing. Oh, Jesus. Yeah. All right. Here's to job training. All right, cool. Well, let's go to Michael for some more hip-hop. I wonder if Michael knows about clipping. He's got to know about clipping. He's so balls deep in hip-hop. Michael, what else are we going to be listening to this week other than clipping?
With first-class legroom, free cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
Hey, what's up? It's This Week in Hip Hop on the Owls at Dawn podcast with me, Michael Burns. Man, I'll say it once and I'll say it again. The first few weeks of this year, I was struggling to find new music to talk about. Now we are inundated with tons of dope shit. Man, 2017 seems like it's going to be a good one. So we'll get right to it. One of my personal favorite artists put out a new record this week. His name is Oddisee. The record is called The Iceberg. I assume many of you have listened to Oddisee before. You might not have. He's someone that really oddly flies under the radar for as talented and prolific of an artist as he is. He is a DC-based artist, I guess PG County to be specific for any DMV listeners. He's someone that is both a rapper and a producer. Very multi-talented guy. He's put out a string of really strong records in recent years. And I just got to say it, this record is fucking awesome. It is so good from start to finish. And I know I've been calling everything good recently, but this isn't because I'm easily impressed. It's because there's been an insane amount of good music coming out. So let's start with the production. Incredible mix on this one of instrumental and sample-based production. Oddisee, historically a really dope producer, but has been moving towards including more instrumentation in his work. He tours with a live band. I don't know if that's influenced how he approaches production, but it seems like it. This record as well, there's a lot of elements of soul, funk, R&B creeping into his style, a style that's historically been a little more straightforward in terms of hip-hop. And it comes off really well. There's a lot more obvious live instrumentation, more singing than on previous records, but it makes this feel like something more than just a simple hip-hop album. This is hip-hop music. It's multifaceted. There's a lot going on. It's just great stuff. And one of the things Oddisee's always done, which he does here, is he really does pull from both Southern and East Coast influences. And I think that's very specific to being from Maryland and from an environment where you have sort of dirty South rap coming up from one side, East Coast rap coming down on the other side, down 95. So really great thing there. So many good songs. So I'm gonna talk about a few that I really like, but let it be said, I like every song on this record. So Things, I talked about this track before. It was released as a single. I think this is the closest Oddisee has ever gotten to a dance track, which might sound silly, but it works really well. It's the most infectious chorus he's ever had too. And it's just nice that an artist like Oddisee, who normally is the type you listen to and think when you're listening to him. I mean that in a good way, because the dude is wildly intelligent and says so many great things lyrically. But it's fun that he has his own version of a turn-up record. Another song I really like is called This Girl I Know. Classic relationship song. And I feel like we don't have enough of these in hip-hop anymore because we have a lot of artists that lie. So this is a really cool genuine relationship song. He has a knack for these. It's insanely detailed. It's real. And you feel like you're in the middle of this tension between hyper confidence and self-doubt, a desire for monogamy and some sort of want of freedom. It's really good, and he does something really great here. So The Girl I Know, another song called Rain Dance stood out to me. This one's really about personal growth. He gives examples from his family to his career to relationships. And by the end of the song, we really are hearing from someone that's made a lot of progress and a lot of growth. And there's just an honesty in his lyricism that's really unique. Lets you into his mind, his intellect, his emotions. And this honesty adds a level of impact to what's already an impeccable lyricism. So all I gotta say is this is a super impressive 12-song project. And I think it's my favorite of the year so far. So listen to that, Odyssey, The Iceberg. Another record, this one's not a hip-hop record as such, so I'll just speak about it real briefly. Thundercat put out a new record called Drunk on Brainfeeder. Obviously, he is not a hip-hop artist as such. He is a bass player, a vocalist, a producer, an arranger, and a very weird guy. But I think the planet that he's on is at least adjacent to the hip-hop solar system. Very simply, you should listen to this project. I think I saw a tweet from Earl Sweatshirt that said something like we should all just listen to it on repeat 80 times. It's probably true. In terms of hip-hop, it has tracks with Kendrick Lamar and Wiz Khalifa. And the song with Wiz Khalifa on it, Drink That, is really awesome. And I imagine if you listen to this regularly, you never thought you'd hear the day where I said a Wiz Khalifa track was awesome. But it's really sick. And he also put out a bonus song called High, featuring Mac Miller from the record that's worth checking out, even though Mac's mostly singing. I won't say any more, but Thundercat, Drunk, you should listen to it. And it really fits a particular set of moods. I'll let you work that out for yourself. The other hip-hop record that came out this week that I'm really excited about, Kareem Riggins, Head Nod Suite. It is on Stone's Throw Records. It's a second solo record, 29 tracks, straight up fucking hip hop. If you are not familiar with Kareem Riggins, he's a Detroit dude, accomplished producer and jazz musician. He's toured the world playing with a lot of jazz greats. Production-wise, he's a disciple of Dilla and someone that really bridges the world of jazz and hip-hop in a way that very few do. I think only, someone like Robert Glasper would be in that conversation. Coincidentally, Kareem Riggins and Glasper co-produced Common's last record, Black America Again. And that record, of course, got a lot of praise for the production on it. It's an instrumental record. There's a poetry interlude halfway through. But yeah, it's one of the most deliberate and explicitly honest titles ever. Head Nod Suite, because it's just so many head nodding beats throughout. And it's one of those few records, we throw the word Dilla around a lot. But God damn it, if this one is not just embodying that guy's spirit and something about the hip-hop sound that comes out of Detroit. It's a lot of interweaving of dusty samples, some non-quantized drum loops, live instruments, and it blurs any clear line between what might be instrumentation and what is sample-based. A lot of this does sound, like I said before, really similar to the production on Common's Black America Again, except it is a little more dusty, a little more off rhythm at certain times, a little more explicitly Dilla-esque. My favorite track was probably Bahia Dreaming. Yeah, Bahia Dreaming is definitely my favorite track. I think I could probably listen to that, I'm going to say, for at least 87 minutes straight. And I'd probably just get up to pee and then come listen to it again. But yeah, this is just a really strong instrumental hip-hop record. I know I've talked about a few instrumental projects soon, but this one's special. This is special. So Kareem Riggins, Head Nod Suite, I recommend that you listen to that. Another thing that came out this week, Future came out with another record. This one's called Hendrix. All I'll say is it really confused me because everyone's excited about it. It's getting a lot of hype. And I listened to it in the shower. That sounds weird, but I do a thing where I like to listen to music in the shower. You should try that too if you don't. And the first track really struck me musically as being really good. It's called Collection. But then I realized the song was about how like women who sleep with 5 different men are whores. And if you sleep with Future once, you're a part of his collection. It just kind of made me feel a little bit dead inside, especially because the other record I was listening to a lot that day was the Odyssey record that talks about love and relationships in a very honest way that recognizes that we fuck up and can be selfish people. But the Future thing was brutal. And I don't know. I just feel like I have to say that. I know it's a boring thing to be like a hip hop head that wants to say mainstream rap is bad because they speak shittily about women and stuff like that. But it is kind of true sometimes, and I just want to acknowledge that tension. I like a lot of mainstream rap that says some very suspect things. I'm just acknowledging the tension. Now, I want to end this week with a shout out to my friend Will, who I think might be the longest consistent listener to the podcast and to this segment as a whole. He is the person that keeps me connected to trends in music, both rap and otherwise, from the perspective of someone born in the mid-90s. It is his birthday, so I just want to say a shout out, have a happy birthday. And more particularly, I would like to say, have a safe birthday, brother. This one is for you. Okay, Owls at Dawn. This Week in Hip Hop. Michael Burns. I'll catch you next week. Bye.
I was thinking God, I was thinking all almonds. I spend more money on security than I make. Just to be safe. Just to be safe, dog.
All right, thanks for that, Michael. And belated shout out and happy birthday to Will, longtime listener of the podcast.
That's right. Happy birthday.
Austin, do you have a birthday jam? Like a go-to?
You know, I used to like, before he became number 45, I used to like Donald Trump by Mac Miller. That makes me want to get in the mood, but I feel guilty listening to that now. So I don't know, for some reason that makes me want to party. But no, I don't really have one. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a party jam, but my birthday jam is definitely the Smiths' Unhappy Birthday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to wish you an unhappy birthday, because you're evil and you lie, and I hope that you'll die.
Again, I think that this is just the quintessential difference between the two of us. You go with the Smiths, and I go with like some cheesy fucking party hip-hop song that I can't even listen to anymore because we have that thing in the office. Oh, well.
Yeah, I think that your birthday jam is basically your id.
Yeah.
Like unrestrained
Great.
id, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's sad indie rocker and yours is jamming the fuck out, right?
Sounds good to me. Well, right on. Odyssey. You like Odyssey, don't you?
I'm digging that new album. I'm glad that Michael brought it up because I'd heard the name, but I never really checked it out.
Okay.
But I'm really digging this new album, Iceberg.
Yeah, I haven't checked it out yet. I haven't transitioned from John Wayne yet. I've just been almost on repeat. What was it, Rap Album 2? So I haven't had a chance yet, but I will. Tomorrow, I guess, will be the day that I jump into some Odyssey. So that sounds good. And then moving forward, guys, as we wrap up here next week, Troy and I had talked about it a little bit in the past, and we teased that we would be doing an episode about meta-modernism. And next week, we are going to have an expert on meta-modernism. He's a gentleman by the name of Seth Abramson. I read a little snippet from something he had written on my Sticky Leaves probably about, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks ago. And he is going to come on, and we're going to have a full main segment chat with him about the new sincerity, about the philosophical movement or the structure of feeling that is known as metamodernism. We'll talk about poetry and art and culture, and he's also a journalist, so I'm sure we'll talk about all kinds of shit, but hopefully all refracted through that lens of metamodernism, which, if you guys don't remember, it's a sort of movement that kind of it doesn't just wallow in postmodern sarcasm or postmodern irony or postmodern deconstruction or skepticism, but it still has a sort of desire for, what would you say, authentic connection, or it has a sort of optimism through the criticism. Troy, does that sound about right? Something along those lines?
I'm a neophyte on this stuff. I've read half of an address. That's my expertise.
Yeah, all right.
So I'm looking forward to being the one on the outside, kind of asking questions, trying to figure out for myself what all this stuff has in common.
Yeah, that sounds good, man. And he wrote a really interesting article that I hope we can talk about too, about the alt-right and the alt-right's sort of emergence out of this paradigm of metamodernism as well. I think the title of the article on the Huffington Post is like the alt-right, the other alt-right, and then like the other alt-right or something like that. I can't remember, but it's really interesting. So that's next week, so that'll be great. So check that out. Hit us up on any of our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram. It's owls_at_Don. Shoot us a message. Tell us what you think. Give us some feedback, Say what up. Even if it's just like a fuck you, just so we know that you're out there. Because we know that there are people out there, but you guys are awfully quiet. Except our Instagram page last week, which for the Flat Earth, that thing fucking blew up, man. I don't know if you saw that. We had some people going crazy about the Flat Earth episode. But
dude, Flat Earth brings everybody out.
I know. So... But we thank you so much for listening. You can also shoot us an email at owls@dawnpodcast@gmail.com. Troy, what up?
Das Vidania, Amerikowski.